my colleague there. Same way in Trichy and Coimbatore, I ask my patients to go to my colleagues to take the treatment. Just to give a very good example, one of my patients was lung cancer. He's from Perambalur. He's coming from 2011. It's a stage 4 lung cancer. He has been on continuous methotrexate maintenance. So far, he has taken 103 methotrexate infusions in our hospital from 2011 to 2020. The last 3 cycles, he said he's finding it difficult to come to Natas because of the COVID situation. So he's going to Srirangam to have this treatment. So this is just an example. So one way we are accommodating them by continuing the treatment in the nearby towns. And another constraint is the accommodation. The patient comes to us one day before, they consult us, take the blood test as well as the COVID test. And then the next day they take the treatment. Now they find it difficult to stay here. So what we do is asking them to do the blood test and COVID test in their locality. Then come in the morning, take the treatment and go back on the same day. This way we are accommodating many of the patients. Another issue is the attenders. Usually they come with an attender, and nowadays with the COVID situation, they find it difficult to have attenders, so it gets delayed. So these are all some of the major problems that cancer patients face, and to some extent we are able to accommodate those things. In general, cancer patients are immunosuppressed. Virtue of the disease, they are immunosuppressed. And majority of our cancer patients are elderly, so age factor also plays a part. And some of them, in fact, majority of them have comorbid conditions: heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, asthma, many other comorbid conditions. This again make them more susceptible to infections. When we give chemotherapy, definitely it suppresses the immunity, and they are also more prone to COVID infections. And because of chemotherapy, they develop neutropenia and they get easily infections of other sorts. So these are all factors which facilitate higher incidence of COVID among cancer patients. However, if we take due precautions, we can definitely avoid getting COVID. Now, in initial stages, in the month of April, a couple of patients were admitted with septicemia, and one patient was admitted in ICU, and that turned out to be COVID positive also. So they spread the disease to our staff nurses, and they themselves spread to their colleagues, and about 20-25 staff nurses are infected in the month of April. We had a difficult problem to quarantine them, treat them, those things. Nowadays, we make a policy to do the COVID test one day before. Only if the COVID test is negative, then we admit them in the hospital for the chemotherapy. So this way, we are now avoiding COVID infections to our staff nurse, to the doctors, and to the paramedical personnel. Patients are also definitely safe by doing this. Definitely it costs extra, but there is no other option. So this way, we are able to restrict cancer patients getting COVID into the hospital setting. If the COVID is positive, naturally, we admit them in our hospital or give them home quarantine. Now, as far as a patient comes to us with cancer, we examine them, evaluate them, stage them, and then take the treatment plan. If it is curable, as far as my policy is concerned, we go ahead with full treatment, whatever that is. For example, lymphomas, testicular tumors, early breast cancer, early cervical cancer, and early head and neck cancers. All these are all curable. So what are the treatment of the standard of care that we tried to give it even during COVID and pandemic. We have to take extra precautions. We have to convince the patient, convince the relatives about the importance of strict safe distancing and masking and take care of the health. So this way we are able to go on with the appropriate treatment and we go to the full extent of curing them. The patients understand once you discuss with them the possibilities, because cancer, if it's not treated in time, definitely it's going to make them worse. Some situations, of course, even if it is a curable condition, we delay the treatment. For example, a couple of my patients, the elderly, hormone-sensitive breast cancer, stage 1 and 2. They are curable by surgery plus hormone treatment. So because of the COVID situation, they don't want to come to the hospital right now. So I have put them on letrozole and they are doing well for the past 2-3 months. And once the situation improves, they said they will come back for the curative surgical treatment. So this way we change the treatment to some extent. If the cancer is incurable, then we don't follow the same treatment protocols. But if they are in the city, if they can afford to come, we definitely give them the standard of care, even if it is stage 4 disease. But if they are outside city, they are not able to come, then we go for a oral type of treatment. And this way, majority of the disease, that way we buy some time. And in some situations, we convert the cancer into a chronic disorder. For example, myeloma, if you take a person under 60, the proper treatment would be to reduce the tumor load and then go for a stem cell transplant. But in this situation, if they are not willing for a stem cell transplant, then we continue the maintenance treatment. Just like a chronic disorder like diabetes, they go on with the maintenance treatment for myeloma. So this way, some of the chronic diseases can be managed with simpler treatment without coming to the hospital. Now, as far as other disciplines are concerned, surgery and radiotherapy, now I would request Professor Bose to give his perspective on how he treats cancer patients during this pandemic. Now, I don't think Professor Bose needs an introduction. He is senior most surgical oncologist of Tamil Nadu. He's a retired professor of Madras Medical College and senior surgical oncologist. Professor Bose. Slides.
So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, sir. So it's indeed a very pleasurable moment for me to be with you, all senior people, respected Subramaniam sir, respected Balasundaram sir. I see Dr. T.V. Govindan, and a lot of senior people who have logged in. My friend Ramanathan from UK. So all senior faculty members in oncology, and my dear colleagues, junior students. And it's indeed a nice moment for me to share this occasion because, you know, it's an unprecedented event that has happened. And we know that this is something which has to be discussed. And it's nice that in VS Hospital, they brought about this. So let me start the discussion by just sharing a few of my slides. So can you, just a moment, please. Okay. So now to discuss the COVID calamity in cancer surgery. So I've been given the pleasant task of discussing about what is COVID to do with the cancer surgery. Now, we all know that COVID has caused a lot of problems based on the population infection that it produced. The COVID complicating cancer increased the morbidity and mortality in the management of malignancies. To raise the problem, we had more lockdowns, we had more quarantines, and then we had what is called as resource competition, where we were wanting to have more ventilators in the ICUs for the COVID patients. And then we had the mystery in the management of COVID and the unpredictable outcome which the COVID produced. And most of all, what is called as fear and isolation. So this fear and isolation was the most important thing which led on to what is called as this COVID calamity. Now, COVID and cancer surgery, how are they related? The adequacy of surgery in cancer cannot be underestimated. We cannot do hypofractionation. We cannot do dose intensity modification in surgeries. So the surgery is always standardized and tailor-made for an individual patient, and this can in no way be reduced. And as you all know, the surgery acts by what is called the zero-order kinetics, which is by either an all or none law. So you do a good surgery or you don't do it. It is not like compromising on your clearance, making your margins smaller, and making your surgery adapt to the COVID situation. No surgery can be adapted to the COVID situation. So my personal opinion is no surgery should be adapted for the COVID presentation. So it should be based on the individual cancer patient, the stage and the type of the tumor, and what is necessary for an individual patient. Now, the COVID delay in surgery, according to a Canadian study, said that 54% of the appointments were delayed, 75% of the pre-diagnosis and recently diagnosed cancers were delayed in management. And this personally caused a lot of major impact in the mental and emotional health of a patient, especially more so when the patient had a metastatic disease or a recently diagnosed disease where it raised a high level of anxiety. So 74% of the patients had a major impact on the mental health. Now, how did we really manage this situation? We had a virtual consultation. So 83% of the people had a virtual consultation in this Canadian study. And still you would see that 71% of them remained concerned about in-person care. And they were not very happy with the virtual consultation. So it's nothing like going and seeing a doctor and to be examined by a doctor and to give a confidence that he is doing well. So, 71% of them were still not happy and they wanted an in-person care. So palliation and screening has taken the major setback. The palliation is most affected because of lack of counseling and poor patient to doctor contact with the isolation which the COVID provided. So palliation has taken a lot of beating. And next is the screening. So we know that screening is a low priority. So we never took a lot of interest in screening people. And in places where screening was routinely done, we know that this will lead on to a surge in the incidence of cancers in the later years to come. And this will take at least 2 years for this is going to settle down. So we know that for a 2 year from now on, we are going to have an increasing number of patients who are going to present to you with various stages of cancer because they are not being screened. And next, the COVID delay. Now, this is what is very interesting. So what we saw by a COVID delay is that most of the people had a 3-month delay in surgery, and this increased the attributable deaths to about 4,700 per year in UK. And the life years lost due to a 3 to 6 month delay will account for 0.9 to 1.9%. And this is around 19 to 43%. This is based on the type of the tumor and the delay that you cause. The most affected malignancies were colon, lung, and breast. So this is basically because, you know, different types of tumors have different doubling times. And based on the doubling times, you will see that the progression of the disease would happen. And now, how do we really manage this situation? And we know that this is an unprecedented happening. So what is there is that we require really a supranormal capacity to manage, because we need social distancing, we need a lot of people to be accommodated, because all of them are going to rush up and come now once the restrictions are opened up, and you know that the lockdown is going to be called off. And we need what is called as ring fencing in the form of financial help for the institutions. Substantial resource management is needed. And so these are all for the management. So what is for the doctors? So the doctors require what is called as a dynamic prioritization of the treatment. So this dynamic prioritization, I would give you 2 or 3 slides on this dynamic prioritization, which is based on individual type of malignancies. And what is more important for everyone is to follow self-discipline. So what is this 3 important characteristics of self-discipline is to wear a mask, maintain social distancing, wash your hands. And as you know, this is the most difficult thing to implement in any proper place. So I've been insisting in wherever place which I go and manage that this is very, very important. So to follow the rules, it is very difficult. For people to understand about social distancing, it is much more difficult. And to wash your hands, that is again another own difficult problem. So unless you maintain this self-discipline, we are not going to conquer COVID. And this is the most important point which I want to stress in this talk. Next, the most important thing is this dynamic prioritization of the surgery. How does this dynamic prioritization work? This works based on the age of the patients, the comorbid, the tumor types, the stage, the resources which you have, the survival benefits which the surgery offers versus the COVID-related mortality. Now, any surgeon should be able to assess all these and then plan a surgery for the patient. If you don't do that, probably then you're making a mistake. What is called as a higher priority is situations where we know that the patient requires a surgery, because without the surgery, she is definitely going to have a morbid situation. You take this patient who is an 82-year-old female with a partial obstruction presenting in the rectum. So this surgery avoids an ostomy. The surgery may give her a proper staging to avoid further chemoradiation if she is going to be T2N0 as predicted by the clinical staging. Now, this is going to matter for the patient because she's going to avoid chemotherapy. She's going to avoid a stoma. So you cannot deny such a surgery, and this becomes a high priority. Let us take another higher priority situation where you have a post-neoadjuvant chemotherapy completion in an ovary, where a patient may require a real radical surgery where you may remove a part of the colon, and then you may even give a HIPEC in situations which may warrant. But you know that this is needed for the patient. A delay of 3 months or 6 months is going to reactivate the disease. And then you have tumors which don't respond to chemoradiation, where you can't buy time. You have something like a chondrosarcoma which doesn't respond to chemoradiation. You need to act fast. So it becomes a high priority. Now let us take something like a medium priority. So this is what Professor Subramaniam was stressing. Like, you have a patient who is a luminal A disease, which is 72 years with a lot of comorbidities, and you know that this patient is going to respond to your hormones. You can definitely buy time. So you see this patient who had a large lesion in the breast, and then you know that she went on to have hormonal therapy for 3 months. And this is the tumor. You see here, it has completely gone off. So with 3 months of hormone, you know that these tumors can really melt, and it can give you time to take care of them. Now, what is the low priority? The low priority situations are pre-malignant diseases, reconstructions, prophylactic surgery, screening, follow-up, routine previews. See, all these are low priority where you can wait. And then this can take at a time when you think that the COVID is a little better. Now, we base our treatment decisions based on these priorities, and that is what is going to make us do a good job in this stressful situation. Now, in the VS hospital, you would see here that we were going down in March and April, where the curves tell us that our outpatient procedures and the major surgeries dropped down in March and April. But now it is picking up, and we have gone into the pre-COVID situation where we have started operating. Now, this I know is because we did not panic, we did not hide, and we know we have accepted the situation, we have acted accordingly, and now we have adapted ourselves. So I really thank the management for ensuring the cancer treatment during the COVID times and converting this hospital into a non-COVID green hospital. And this adaptation during the COVID times has made treatment possible for every patient with cancer. So thank you very much. I would appreciate if you have any questions.
We'll have the panel discussion a little later, Professor Bose.
Yes,
It's
sir.
an excellent talk. Now we'll go to the radiation aspect. I request Dr. Balasundaram to give his management approach.
Thank you, sir. Right, Sharmana.
Dr. Balasundaram is a well-known radiation oncologist, a senior radiation oncologist in VS Hospital, and one of the dynamic radiation oncologists we have. Dr. Balasundaram.
Thank you, sir. Respected Professor Dr. Subramaniam, sir. Respected Professor Dr. J.C. Bose, sir. All other panel members and all the participants. Good evening to all. So now, handling the cancer patients in COVID-19 times. What are the perspectives from the radiation oncologist point of view? Just we are going to see this. The focus is going to be on patient selection, radiation therapy fractionation, radiotherapy planning and execution, review of the patients on radiotherapy treatment, brachytherapy, follow-up protocols, COVID positive patients, how we are going to handle. All we are going to see in another 10 minutes. The source for this piece of information is going to be a reference document for the functioning of a radiotherapy facility during the COVID pandemic, done nicely by the AIMS Radiation Oncology Experts Panel, New Delhi. They have collected a lot of information from all important oncology journals, directives from the major international oncology societies, and different institutional guidelines on COVID-19 pandemic, and they have made the nice reference document, and we are using it for the guidelines. Regarding the patient selection on radiotherapy, in whom we can avoid radiotherapy in this pandemic, hormone positive elderly women with carcinoma of breast post BCS and started on hormonal therapy, probably we can avoid. Palliative radiotherapy in patients with ECOG 3 or 4, the expected life expectancy is going to be less than 3 months. Probably they are very unlikely to be benefited with radiation. Probably we can avoid radiation, and that it can be decided on case-to-case basis. Defaulted patients due to personal or logistic or post-operative complications who have presented for post-operative radiotherapy where the window of benefit has been lost. For example, if you take a breast cancer and after chemotherapy, if the patient presents after 6 months, definitely the benefit is not going to be there with post-op radiotherapy. So we can deny radiation in that situation. In whom we can delay radiation therapy, like carcinoma of prostate, kept on androgen deprivation therapy, we can delay at least for a while, we can buy some time. In carcinoma of breast, if adjuvant radiotherapy is indicated, a delay of up to 4 to 6 months after surgery and 1 month after adjuvant chemotherapy is acceptable. For hormone positive tumors, hormone therapy can be started and a slightly longer delay may be acceptable. In head and neck cancers, patients on neoadjuvant chemotherapy with good response with chemotherapy and tolerance, RT can be delayed with 2 to more additional cycles of chemotherapy. In GI cancers, adjuvant radiotherapy in carcinoma rectum, stomach, pancreas, all may be delayed by a few weeks to buy time, and adjuvant chemotherapy can be started as per the indications. Radiation in whom we can delay again. In brain tumors, grade 2 tumors, post complete excision, we can delay radiation. Grade 3 tumors, near total excision, and certain elderly patients with grade 4 gliomas, we can start them on temozolomide and we can delay them radiation therapy. Radiotherapy may be deferred for benign tumors like meningiomas, pituitary adenomas, and AV malformations. In CA lung, those receiving neoadjuvant chemotherapy with good response for few more cycles and we can delay radiation. prophylactic cranial radiation in small cell lung cancer may be delayed or we can avoid it also. In palliative radiotherapy for patients with no acute symptoms, adequate pain control with analgesics, probably radiation we can delay in this pandemic. In whom RT must be given? Patients already on radiotherapy, they can continue radiation. They can be considered for a modification to a hypofractionated regime. In given some sites like breast, like rectum and all, we can try to modify the fraction size. Rapidly proliferating tumors like head and neck cancers, cervical cancers, anal canal, esophagus, post-operative cases with residual disease in fast-growing tumors, young patients with grade 4 gliomas, or we can start radiation immediately. Urgent palliative radiotherapy like malignant spinal cord compression, SVC obstruction, severe bone pain who are not responding to the analgesics, hemostatic RT, all these situations in palliative setup, we cannot delay radiation. We need to sort them on radiation. Adjuvant radiotherapy may be given with a low priority if recurrence risk is less than 20% at 10 years. Regarding the fraction size in EBRT, normally in CA breast, we are giving 50 gray in 25 fractions over 5 weeks. In BCS cases, we are giving extra 1 week also. Up to 6 weeks, we are giving radiation. So we can slightly modify the fraction size to accommodate more number of patients with a less shrunken workforce. Like 40 gray in 15 fractions over 3 weeks. Instead of conventional regimes, we can try. And accelerated partial breast irradiation protocol like 30 gray, 6 gray per fraction into 5 fraction in suitable BCS patients, we can try. So like Florence trial, the recent updates, it says the APBI, that is accelerated partial breast irradiation with conventional 6 weeks treatments, the results are comparable after 10 years of long-term outcome. And cosmetically, APPI, they say it is better than conventional treatment. Even outside the pandemic also, we can accommodate this type of hypofractionated protocols. In head and neck cancers, a dose of 65 gray in 30 fractions instead of 70 gray in 35 fractions. We are trying to reduce the treatment by 1 week. Then that also we can try. In post-op setting, we cannot modify the fraction size. Generally, as usual, we can treat 60 gray in 30 fractions over 6 weeks period. Concurrent chemotherapy, as per the indications, we can give. Carcinoma cervix, instead of 50 gray in 25 fractions, probably 45 in 20. That is accepted protocol in many government institutions like JIPMER, PGI, they are all using even nowadays. Pre-pandemic year also, they are using the same protocol and the results are fantastic. We can cut short the treatment period by 5 fractions. And when brachytherapy is not possible due to not availability of the theater or other anesthetist teams are not available, probably with EBRT, we can boost instead of brachytherapy. And for carcinoma prostate, it is better to delay the prostatic radiotherapy at this time. SBRT protocols may be given a priority over moderate hypofractionation protocols. In GBM, instead of 60 gray in 30 fractions, along with temozolomide, probably we can cut short the treatment in selected subgroup of patients like elderly patients above 60 years, 65 years. Probably we can cut short the 6 weeks treatment. Instead of that, we can give 25 gray in 5 fractions over 5 gray. And GI cancers, the no role for hypofractionation treatment, as we all know, probably in rectum, in preoperative situations, we can try pre-op short course radiotherapy of 25 gray in 5 fractions instead of conventional concurrent chemoradiation therapy. In carcinoma lung, conventional fraction to a dose of 60 gray in 30 fractions over the 6 weeks we can give. We can avoid prophylactic cranial radiation in SCLC. SBRT can be given for very early lesions. In palliative radiotherapy, for spinal cord compression, for bone pains, instead of 30 gray in 10 fractions, probably we can go for 8 gray in single fractions. For SVC obstructions, we can give just 2 fractions. For brain metastasis, we can give, instead of 30 gray in 10 fractions, 20 gray in 5 fractions. Treatment planning and execution. The 2D planning, whenever applicable, probably we can try, like for bone secondaries, spinal cord, spinal secondaries, just we can try with 2D planning that will avoid lot of manipulation in the machine. Hypofractionative treatment, highly conformal and image guidance techniques, all we can use as usual. Routine practice, CT based planning we can use. IV contrast, we can avoid. Licenses for remote planning and contouring may be obtained from the vendors. So as we all know, licenses for remote planning and contouring may be obtained from the vendors. Each planning treatment setup all should be followed by appropriate disinfecting of the surface of the couches, immobilization devices, and radiotherapy accessories for disinfection. Thermoplastic cast of each patient should be kept separately in the treatment room. No pile up. Now in many centers, just we are piling up all the treatment thermoplastic cast that should be avoided in this pandemic era. History pertaining to the symptoms of COVID should be asked for every day by the RT technologist before taking them for the treatment. Any COVID-19 positive suspected patients, they should have their treatment stopped and restarted only after negative results. Patients on the machine, they need to be restricted and spread out with the intervals to avoid crowding. Avoid complicated treatment planning like SBRT, SRS, as it can take more time for treatment execution and increase the risk for transmission. Avoid using ABC in many procedures, any IGRT and all, we are using activated breathing coordinator that can generate sometimes aerosol. Better to avoid that in the machine room to contain the infection between the staff and other patients. On review of the patients on treatment by video conferencing, if possible, we can do it. For physical review, a minimum of 1 to 2 meter distance has to be maintained. Patients coming for review may be advised to come alone without any attendant unless the patient is a child, sick, or they have difficulty in comprehension. Regarding brachytherapy, in cervical cancers, normally after finishing the EBRT, we are giving 3 to 4 sessions of brachytherapy. Instead of that, we can cut short the number of brachytherapy sessions, like 9 gray in 2 sessions, weekly once. We can try. That is being followed in JIPMER and PGI. Again, in the routine practice, they are doing for very decades together with very good results. That also we can adapt. Incisions may be performed under IV sedation rather than GA, and vault brachytherapy may be continued as usual. Interstitial implants and brachytherapy for the prostate, all better to avoid. Head and neck brachytherapy, oral cavity, tongue cancer, intraluminal brachytherapy for esophagus, lungs, all the upper aerodigestive tract brachytherapy are strictly prohibited. Better not to do according to this AIMS panel. Breast brachytherapy may be avoided and replaced with EBRT as in APBI. Regarding the follow-up policy, teleconferencing platforms can be used as a primary modality of communication in follow-up. Patients, they should be educated regarding the signs and symptoms of recurrence or disease progression. Follow-up investigations may be delayed or postponed if the patient is doing well. Remedies for any radiation reactions, adjuvant treatments like hormonal therapy, all can be advised over the teleconference. The frequency of the follow-up may be slightly decreased. Just we are trying to buy time. In case if the patient becomes positive for COVID-19, what we are going to do? Since no dedicated RT facilities are available, we have single machine, we are trying to treat 40-50 patients. We cannot accommodate a COVID positive patient in our setups. So in a suspected or positive cases, they should not be treated until they are cured of COVID-19.
Yeah.
All decisions should be taken towards specific needs of the patients based on the present pandemic situation and available resources. One may have to accept the compromise in the overall outcome of the patients in these uncertain times. And finally, just I want to show a few slides regarding the low dose radiation as a potential life-saving treatment for COVID pneumonia. So people are talking about the COVID pneumonia in the radiation role. and the AIIMS, they are doing a small trial as well for this. Just I want to show some slides on this. The historical evidence for the radiation in pneumonia. The evidence that radiotherapy has been successfully used to treat a number of inflammatory and infectious conditions, including bacterial and viral pneumonia in early 20th century. 80 to 90 years back, they have used radiotherapy for treating the infectious pneumonia. Based upon its proposed mechanism of action, this may represent a viable treatment option to reduce the cytokine storm-induced inflammatory effects that occurs in the majority of critically ill COVID-19 patients. According to the Calabrese et al. In 2019, they have indicated that diseases with a significant inflammatory component, they demonstrate reduced features of the inflammation following exposure to radiation of doses less than 1 gray. That is called M2 polarization. And diseases with infectious component such as pneumonia, gas gangrene, sinusitis, all they respond to radiation doses of more than 1 gray. That is called M1 polarization. Just we can see this with a low dose of less than 1 gray, they elaborate M2 markers and it produces M2 phenotype polarization. In case of high dose in infective situations, if you give more than 1 gray dose, then it elaborate M1 markers and M1 phenotype polarization. So the same group of people, Calabrese, in last year, they proposed to dose range of 0.2 to 2 gray for optimal human therapeutic effectiveness. This dose range has the potential to induce polarization of both M1 and M2 phenotypes. Considering the level of evidence and the proposed mechanism of action of low-dose radiotherapy, researchers, they recommend that a single total dose of 0.3 to 0.5 gray, that is around 50 rats, just a half of 1 gray, for both lungs in COVID pneumonia, they are presenting with cytokine storm. This low dose of radiation appears to be most benefit in acute phase of illness where cytokine surge occurs. So, the low dose lung RT for COVID pneumonia, a pilot study has been started with interventional open label clinical trial by AIIMS and other 10 groups of people. So they are giving 70 centigrade in 1 fraction to both lungs in addition to standard of care. The actual start of the date is June 2020. Estimated case completion date is July 2020, and estimated study completion date is going to be this month end, August 2020, with primary endpoints are going to be symptomatic improvement by National Early Warning Score or new score system with length of hospital stay in days and number of ICU admission in days or deaths. All these will be primary endpoints and the results will be out soon. So this is regarding the low dose lung RT for COVID-19 pneumonia. So the take home message is going to be decision on radiotherapy treatment according to the priority from low to high. Whenever possible, we can avoid radiation, can avoid or delay radiation in some patients like low grade, low risk adjuvant radiotherapy, as in certain breast cancers and prostate cases, can delay radiation in certain situations, alternating with chemotherapy like chemo responding cancers, head and neck cancers, certain lung cancers, we can try to delay. Chemo radiation in conventional dose in potentially curable cases like head and neck cancers, cervical cancers, hypofractionated schedules that cut short the treatment time. Again, in certain sites like breast cancers, rectal cancers, prostatic cancers, and palliative radiotherapy setup. To avoid brachytherapy whenever resources are not available due to this pandemic, and we can replace that to some extent with EBRT. And patients with mild infective symptoms but tested negative may be allowed to continue the radiation therapy with adequate PPE. Patients with suspected or proven COVID-19 and are symptomatic, better to defer RT and till they become negative. Patients with suspected or proven COVID-19 and are asymptomatic may be deferred radiotherapy until they are deemed non-contagious by the local health bodies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Balasundaram, for the excellent talk. Now the meeting
Thank
is
you, sir.
open to all. You can post your questions in the chat window. Now I will start the discussion. Dr. Suresh is a senior medical oncologist from BS Hospital. A patient due to chemotherapy comes to the outpatient and we found to be COVID positive. What would be your approach, Dr. Suresh?
The patient is found to be COVID positive, sir. Usually we send the patient to a COVID center and we will advise them that chemo can be postponed up to 2 weeks from the time of diagnosis. And from the day of discharge, we can wait 1 more week. And post completion of treatment or patient recovering from COVID, we will advise them to continue with the normal chemo which the patient had before the treatment, diagnosis of COVID. There need not be any change in the treatment. Only thing is there will be a 2 weeks delay in the treatment. That's all.
Thank you. Now there is a question by Dr. Karthikeyan Rajendran. Only 70% patients are positive for RT-PCR. So what precautions we take for surgery? Dr. Bose?
Right. See, as I was answering there, you have to consider every patient as a potential spreader of COVID. So we need to take all precautions, like we follow type 2 PPE in all high-risk areas. Now, that is why I was telling you the most important thing is your self-discipline. See, we know that we have dealt with so many diseases. We dealt with the HIV pandemic. Did we not deal with other pandemics? Now, we should know how to deal with the pandemic. Unnecessarily standing together and talking in groups should be avoided. And we know that the most common place where we contact COVID is to have a talk with your friend or to talk with your colleague. So try to avoid such mannerisms. So my personal thing is you finish your job and leave the place as early as possible. Don't try to remain in high-risk centers for a longer period of time. The next thing is try to plan your work in such a way that you don't have to be there for a long duration of time. So if you execute your surgeries in a very planned manner with good planning and pre-operative decision making, you will be able to do it in a very nice way. So my personal advice is, rather than keeping on testing somebody, you try to take every patient as a potential spreader and try to follow all measures. So the simplest thing is to follow a type 2 PPE and not to have, see what happens is when you wear a full PPE like for a COVID patient, the general tendency is to float all the rules. So we know that in areas where we are treating COVID patients, infection among health personnel are very low. But only in areas where we relax, we find that the infection rates are very high. So it is a lesson for us to take that we cannot relax in areas like receptions, right? Where in the front office, where people keep talking, right? So these are the areas in the restaurant or the cafeteria where people sit and chat. So these are the areas which are very, very important. So we need to attach a lot of significance to such things. So that's why I said self-discipline is very, very important, and this has to be followed by everybody. We should not think that it is for somebody else to follow and we keep floating all the rules. So if you are able to test a patient before admission and one of the relative as a COVID negative, and then you admit and go ahead with the surgery, and then the patient becomes COVID positive, you know that that can also happen because there are so many contacts. We don't know how a patient takes COVID. So in such a situation, all you have to do is to shift a patient to a proper COVID hospital and manage the patient accordingly. And you have to quarantine all the contacts and test all the contacts. This is the best we can do in this person's situation. So we have to adapt ourselves to the situation which we are now facing. So if you don't adapt yourself and keep thinking that, you can, prevent a COVID from happening in you by floating all the rules. This is never going to happen. So my personal advice to all my colleagues and all my workers, co-workers is, please follow the self-discipline, and we can get over this in a very fine and very nice way, rather than trying to do extensive testings and trying to do so many complicated measures. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bose. I remember one of your patients had hysterectomy, and about like 1 week before, COVID was negative. But post-operative, she had COVID infection, and she was transferred to a COVID center. Luckily, she survived. So
Yep.
no problem. So this is one of those.
It's not luck. I should congratulate the entire VS team for that, because right from our ICU and all these places,
Yes.
none of our staff became positive, in spite of having a patient who was COVID positive with us, and we operated on her. None of the staff tested positive after this patient was tested positive. So this is what I want to insist, that it is not that once a patient is positive, you have to become a positive in treating the patient. So it is that you can still manage a patient and get away with it without becoming positive if you follow all the rules which are given for you.
Question to Dr. Balasundaram. For case of carcinoma
Yes, sir.
lung, Dr. Shreya Trivedi has asking, cancer lung comorbidity, ECOG 2 to 3, already on radiation. Can we consider such patient for low dose radiation?
Yeah, low dose radiation for COVID pneumonia, it is under trial. So we are trying to give a small dose of 50 to 70 centigrade. It's not even 1 gray. So people are trying that. We don't know about the results. They are doing. The results are going to be out by this month end. Probably for already we are giving radiation for the lung cancer. Patient is on treatment. Whether to complete the, whether to include the entire lung with a small dose of radiation, I think it may be acceptable. If the patient is not doing well with the conventional routine standard of care, probably we can think of giving a low dose of radiation to the lungs, provided the results are out and it says the results are good. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, for chemotherapy patients, when we suspect COVID infection, if the RT-PCR is negative, we do a CT screen. That seems to be a little more specific because they have now developed various gradations of the COVID infection. And we are seeing COVID patients without RT-PCR positivity, its clinical symptoms and CT chest findings. So we repeat this RT-PCR again to confirm it. So this also is common. So as already Rajendran has mentioned, only 70% of the patients show RT-PCR positivity. So you supplement it with CT chest also. Question to Dr. Nithya. How do you follow up a patient with chemotherapy who is recovering from COVID?
Chemotherapy in the times of COVID is it has to be taken with caution, sir. As you've already mentioned, we have to prioritize the patient based on the type of cancer and some of the biological characteristics of the cancer as well. For example, high risk triple negative breast cancer cannot be we cannot avoid chemotherapy in such patients. The lymphoma patients have to be given. There is no question of low priority in these patients. So if the patient is going to be completing chemotherapy, then the follow-up schedule should be very, very carefully, the chemotherapy plan itself should be very carefully done for these patients, trying to minimize the number of visits to the hospital. The weekly chemos can become 3 weekly, the 3 weekly can become monthly, and maybe sometimes even once in 6 weeks. So once the patient completes the chemotherapy schedule, and fortunately the patient still does not have any COVID, then if the patient is not symptomatic or is at a high risk or things like that, then the follow-up schedule should be again prioritize based on how the disease goes on. We have to minimize the outpatient consults and ask them not to come to the OPD, because as the risk of neutropenia and immunosuppression is maximum within the first 4 to 6 weeks after completion of chemo, after which probably their immune system is going to recover. So most of the consults can be made into teleconsults if the patient does not require any imaging. And in patients who require imaging to document remission, this has to be done on a priority basis, because only then we will know whether to continue the chemotherapy or not. So that is also a very important thing. Otherwise, and one more thing we can do based on the imaging is to change to oral chemotherapy whenever possible. If the patient cannot come to the hospital for risk of for any logistic reasons, we can convert into oral chemotherapy or hormonal therapy if available for a transient period of time for about 2 to 3 months to tide over the crisis, and then ask them to come for chemotherapy again. So that is also one important thing we have to do with regards to imaging. So that is where people are now worried coming for imaging to the hospital. So that is one thing they are concerned, because there is a big mix of patients when it comes to imaging, and people are not sure whether the centers are actually doing sanitization measures after each patient is being screened. So that is one important thing we have to consider. Most of our patients are now reviewing on teleconsult basis only, and we are trying to minimize even the chemotherapy visits. If they want chemotherapy, they are just contacting us on a previous day. They come on a teleconsult. We inquire the symptoms, signs. If they have any reports to be uploaded, they upload on the teleconsult portal, and it helps us to decide whether the patient is going to get further therapy or not. And on the next day when they get admitted, we actually give them a kind of a green corridor, because they don't have to come visit a doctor 2-3 times. So they go directly into the wards and they are examined inside the wards. So that is a better way of probably seeing them, rather than asking them to come to the hospital repeatedly for an examination for blood investigations. And wherever possible, the investigations are actually transferred to their local labs, something near their house where it can be done very easily, and the reports can be sent to the doctor immediately. So that is going to be, this probably be there for another few months or even a year. So that is probably going to be the order of the day. It makes the life for the patient also very easy actually, and the exposure for the physician is also much lesser.
Question to Dr. Saravanan Perisamy. A lady patient with carcinoma breast had completed 6 cycles of neoadjuvant chemotherapy. She is fixed for surgery. Pre-op investigation showed COVID positivity. So how would you approach? When would you like to operate on her?
This is the most important question that we have come to this point now. Initially, we were avoiding surgery on all these patients. Presently, our concern only, we are now, as Bose sir was telling us, our protocols inside the theater and outside the theater is also very clear that the healthcare personnel getting infected because of a COVID handling a COVID positive patients have become virtually zero in our hospital. So now the question that remains is how safe it is to operate on a patient with COVID positive infection.
For the patient.
For the patient. Now the infection rate is enormous. We are going to, the CT chest screening, if we are going to do, many asymptomatic patients who were earlier COVID positive are going to show some CT changes for a long time to come. It's not disappearing. The CT changes are not disappearing within a short time, within a month or two. So right now, my protocol is to, in a COVID positive patients with a CT chest, they have a severity score of less than 15. Then probably I will wait for a week to see if the patient develops any symptoms. If it is more than 7 days and they don't have symptoms, I proceed with surgery. But if the severity score is more, I tend to wait for 30 days until, because up to 28 days, some of them have shown activation and symptoms. So I wait for 30 days for them and an RT-PCR to be negative before proceeding with surgery. See, as the pandemic evolves, we are also learning. There are many important questions that comes as far as surgery is concerned, because surgery seems to be the most dangerous affair for the healthcare personnel, as well as the outcome for the patient is also poorer. In one study, they have quoted a mortality rate of nearly about 20%. Now, as the pandemic is proceeding, we now have more number of positive patients. So the question arises, even when a patient who have recovered completely from COVID shows a negative RT-PCR and a negative CT chest, they seem to be developing a lot of post-COVID thrombotic events. So how safe it is to operate on the patients, or what kind of anticoagulation you should be practicing in the post-operative period? All these are only questions right now. The hematologist whom I have spoken has said to put them on an oral anticoagulation or a Clexane for 2 weeks after they recover from COVID is sufficient. But they don't have an answer what to do in the post-operative period. I think we need to, at this juncture, we need to take all the precautions as we take for our regular patients. And we should keep our eyes and ears open to see anything comes in the literature which suggests that we need to escalate the anticoagulation in the post-operative period.
Any further comments?
Can I have a
Professor Bose?
question, sir, for all the panelists?
Yes.
Do you think that COVID is going to suppress the immunity, thereby flare up the disease? So I can just narrate an instance where we have a patient for whom we have done a radical hysterectomy in another hospital. And this patient was taken up for radiation, and she had 2 cycles of chemotherapy. And she became COVID positive. And the treatment was withheld for a short time, and then it was continued back. Right? And at the end of the radiation, we find that the patient has relapsed. The only thing is she had a surgery. In this surgery, the nodes on the right side on the pelvic region were positive, right? And she had an adenocarcinoma of the cervix, right? So my question to all the panelists is, do you think COVID can suppress the immunity, thereby flare up the malignancy? Can you give an answer to this? Do you think it's possible? Do we have something?
Personally, I feel definitely there will be some immunosuppression, but it is short-lived. It's going to be about 2 weeks maximum. So thereafter, the antibodies are going to form, and the corona is not going to be further depress our immunity. So this 2 weeks of immunity suppression, I don't think is going to cause much of a chronic disorder like cancer. So that's my
Where
feeling.
is the relapse, sir? Where is the relapse? Is it a pelvic relapse or distant metastasis?
It's a local relapse.
Local relapse.
It's a local relapse in spite of having a margin negative resection, and it is a sidewall recurrence.
Any vault brachytherapy added along with EBRT?
No, sir, we have not yet started. That's why I said when the external beam RT was over, then we find that she's got a recurrence.
Very unusual.
It's very unusual because we don't develop such a recurrence within such a short period of time. But the problem was she was tested COVID positive, and the treatment, radiation treatment, has to be delayed for some time. That was the only issue she had. Now,
transient immunosuppression due to viral, it's basically viral, so some cell-mediated immunity is going to come down for a while. So probably that's the reason they land up immunosuppressed for a while. But there have been no studies to say that immune suppression happens because of COVID. So that's probably because if the patient is very sick, they would have received about 2 weeks of dexamethasone. That is probably the reason they became immunosuppressed. But in asymptomatic patients who have not been on any supportive therapy or any therapy for COVID, I think there is no reason to stop any form of treatment, even including chemotherapy. That's what the ESMO guidelines also say. No dose reduction is permitted during a COVID crisis. If the patient recovers, they come back after COVID completely recovered, the counts are normal, we proceed with the full dose of chemotherapy, except in certain other conditions like where we need to give immunotherapies. We have a potential of causing pneumonitis. So that is only the current situation, but there is no a published report of immunosuppression due to cold,
Okay.
and there is no particular guideline as such.
Right. Now, my question is like this. See, for example, this lady was COVID positive and she was isolated, right? So does isolation and segregation from the family, right? And once you know that she is COVID positive, you're going to treat her with a different outlook. Everybody is going to isolate her, right? Even the family isolates them. And then as you know that once you become COVID positive, you take all those precautions, you are put on this, that, you are hospitalized for some time, kept on observation. Because you are on chemotherapy, you are kept on all those things, right? So this fear, I think, kills most of the people. So my opinion is definitely COVID has got a strong sense of immunosuppression. And if we want to demonstrate that, probably we need to do some serology studies and probably analyze the TIL in these tumors. So ask Dr. Chandra, our
So
pathologist.
Suresh, your comment on this immunosuppression caused by corona.
The ESMO guidelines and everything say you can continue with chemo, and the monoclonal antibodies and the immunotherapies which act through the antigen antibody complex mediated treatment, if they are already on these monoclonal antibodies or immunotherapies, continue. The thing is, if they are to be started on a new patient, to be withheld. Other than that, if they are getting a CDK4/6 inhibitor or an immunotherapy before COVID, there is no point in taking that. The problem with immunotherapy and this monoclonal is they act against the ADCC component. So that is a thing wherein the immunity, the cell-mediated immunity comes down. And nowadays, more than IgG or IgM, they say the cell-mediated immunity is the one which is more toxic in COVID, which is causing all the more complications. So from chemotherapy point of view, if the patient is stable, able to take up all the immunotherapies and CDK4/6 inhibitors, there is no point in stopping. But a new patient, if required, we will wait till some more time and go ahead with the normal chemotherapy without any change in the dosage.
Now, if the cell-mediated immunity is shifted towards the COVID, what will happen for the malignancy? Don't you think the malignancy will be deprived of the cell-mediated immunity?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So that's the thing is, the basic of immunotherapy is again the same. To boost the cell-mediated immunity or the T-cell immunity. And basically the malignancy lacks cell-mediated immunity. So this COVID can suppress some more immunity and express the tumor cells more.
In most of these,
sorry, coming to adenocarcinoma of the cervix, which is not a uncommon, it's a uncommon malignancy. It has got more aggressive type than a normal squamous cell carcinoma. Sir. That can also be a reason in your case.
in most of these immunotherapies, the major concern that has been is the associated immune-related adverse event of pneumonitis. That is one concern they have when they give immunotherapies, because this can flare up. The same mechanism happens in immunotherapy-induced pneumonitis as what happens in COVID also. So they are very concerned about a tumor flare or an immune-mediated adverse reaction happening. So we should be giving immunotherapies with a lot of caution. And in case the patient is on chronic immunotherapy of more than 2 years, we still don't have documented benefit of immunotherapy beyond 2 years. So those patients should be, we should be stopping immunotherapy in such patients when there is a COVID pandemic, because they can land up with more aggressive toxicities. I mean, the complications of COVID can be more pronounced in such patients. So that is one concern that they have raised. And the other concern is when we use bleomycin. So bleomycin usage should be minimized as much as possible during COVID crisis is what is recommended. And again, the common lymphomas where we use bleomycin, commonest is Hodgkin's. So in Hodgkin's, they advise treatment modality to be tailored based on PET. As the RATHIL trial said, we omit bleomycin and give AVD instead of ABVD. and so that we can use more of GCSF. We can even use a dose escalated protocol where you can use GCSF and suppress the disease to a maximum extent. So bleomycin is one other concern we have. So these are common concerns that have been addressed, but none of the recommendations actually ask us to stop any form of chemotherapy or allow for any dose reduction, except if the particular drug is going to cause a severe interstitial pulmonary toxicity. The one other drug that is supposed to be acting in a similar way is trastuzumab emtansine, the Kadcyla drug that has also got a very high incidence of drug-induced pneumonitis, which occurs within the first 2-3 weeks. The same happens with our routine tyrosine kinase inhibitors for lung cancer, the erlotinib, geftinib, afatinib, and osimertinib. Many of these patients land up with either a very early onset of interstitial pneumonitis, or they go on to get pneumonitis over a period of time. So that is also going to be a problem when they continue treatment and get infected with COVID. And these patients probably, if they develop pneumonitis, then we can't challenge them with the drug again, because it's going to worsen their the lung capacity as such. The lung disease is going to worsen. So except for a very few drugs which specifically act on the lungs, I think most of the other chemotherapies do not cause any form of adverse reactions, and the recommendation is to continue the chemotherapy as they would have in a non-COVID patient.
So hello. I want to share a small practical experience what we faced some time back in this pandemic. We had 2 patients of tracheostomy post-surgery for the neck cancers, and 2 to 3 colostomy patients. Always in the radiation oncologist may be there in this group. So whenever we try to treat any tracheostomy patients or colostomy patients, even though they must be COVID negative only, better to treat them at the end of the day. As a last patients, we need to schedule them so that any droplet or like any secretions coming out of the tracheostomy patients, better they should be at the last of the day. Then we can do always as usual fumigation. So any scheduling of this type of patients at the end of the day we need to do, just as practical tips. Thank you.
Balasundaram mentioned that if you have a dedicated machine to
Yes,
treat
sir.
COVID patients alone, then you would be willing to treat those patients. Don't you think it will affect their immunity?
Definitely, sir. It is going to affect, because there is, I am not sure for any advanced, very real urgent indications are there, like any bleeding, any cord compression patients, brain secondaries patients who are not responding to any steroids. All these type of very urgent indications only people are treating when they are positive for COVID. Otherwise, in many centers, all the ASTRO, ESMO, all protocols, they are advising to stop treatment unless it's a real critical situation to continue with the radiation, except for some palliative setups. Otherwise, people are not treating any COVID positive patients.
Any other comments? I think since there are no other queries or comments, I thank all the participants, Professor Bose, Dr. Balasundaram, Dr. Suresh, Dr. Saranam Perisamy, Dr. Nitya, for the excellent participation. As Professor Bose has emphasized, the most important thing is prevention. I think you have to have social distancing, masking, and hand washing. Everyone. You must think every other person as a potentially COVID infected person. So we have to behave accordingly. So that's the most important thing. And second thing, early diagnosis. This is very, very important. We have seen, irrespective of the age, irrespective of the comorbid conditions, if we diagnose a COVID situation in the early stage, we are able to cure them. We are able to control the disease. Whereas if they come late, even young persons, they succumb to the disease. So the important thing, you have to be aware of that any person who is having upper respiratory infection or a lower respiratory infection, flu-like symptoms, even gastric symptoms. Nowadays, we see many patients only with gastric symptoms. We have to think of COVID possibility. So once we diagnose it early, then definitely we should be able to cure the disease. I thank you all for the participation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.